to everybody. So I'm Dr. Jyotsna Vanka, practicing in New Delhi at Pune Santula. And today I'm going to speak about gadget addictions in youngsters. So this has been an ongoing problem for quite a couple of years now, but then since the last 1.5 years where COVID has spiked, obviously the problem has exponentially increased compared to what used to be the problem a couple of years back. Now, gadget addictions, like I said, since lockdown has happened, since COVID has happened, social distancing has happened, it has been a huge burden on the physical, mental and emotional state of a lot of youngsters, older people, pretty much everybody. So now, because of these restrictions that the situation and the government has placed on us, it has become a necessity for us to interact as much as possible, either through social media or gadgets or internet use. So now, up to a certain extent, these are obviously not pathological behaviors. But why are we talking about internet addiction? Why are we talking about gadget addiction? Because this has obviously become a far bigger problem than simple interaction and socializing. Now, on recent studies conducted very much in India and not more than 3-4 months back have shown that at present there are more than 65% of children who are addicted to their phones, and more than 50% of them who react almost violently at depriving them of their gadgets. So this is quite a concerning matter, because hopefully couple of months down the line we have to get back to as normal a life as possible, like prior to what COVID has done to us in the last 1.5 years. So the long-term consequences of these are not just having children who are addicted to their phones, but also children who are unable to go back to schools, children who are unable to form social relationships with others, children who are not able to manage their problems in a healthy way, instead react impulsively, etc. Now, even in the last couple of months in our clinical practice itself, we've seen so many children who, let us say, go off to their grandparents' house in villages or something like that, and then they go through these short periods of time where they are not able to access the internet or gadgets or playing their online games, etc. And they have turned up with so many behavioral problems, having fits of rage, throwing things around, misbehaving with parents, no boundaries set for the kind of language used, no care or concern for the kind of property destruction that they are creating, things like that. That basically means that their ability to think of solutions, ability to react in a healthy way to a negative situation is slowly deteriorating over a period of time. Now, why is it that we are calling this an addiction? Now, a lot of people are aware of a lot of substances that are called addiction. कि alcohol से addicted है, या smack से addicted है, या nicotine से addicted है. But then this is a relatively new terminology that has come up in the recent times of behavioral addictions. So now we categorize a lot of other things also under the addiction category, like for example the internet and gadget addiction, shopping addictions, sex and masturbation, gambling. All of these fall under behavioral addictions. That basically means that there is no substance that you can look at and say, yeah, he's addicted to this or she's addicted to this, but these are more behavioral patterns that are pathological and follow a lot of criteria that addiction as an illness do. So now, what are the criteria for addiction? What are the things that you have to look out for when you're talking about your kid or your relative or your known person having an addiction problem, especially a behavioral addiction problem? So now there are a few things that are very basic. So first thing in addiction is that you crave for something. So even if I am busy right here, right now with y'all, in my mind constantly I'm thinking, when will this get over? I need to go back to my phone. When will this get over? I need to talk to my friends. When will this get over that, like, my life's in PUBG or something are dying. So basically you're constantly craving to go back to the substance that you are right now involved with. In this case, a behavioral pattern. Second is lack of control, which basically means you know that you have to, let's say, wake up tomorrow early morning for a class. You have to attend a class at 9 a.m. and you know that you have to be up and fresh for the class, but then you're stuck on your phone playing a game maybe, or something, some kind of screen time activity, and even though you know that you have to wake up and pay attention at 9 next day morning, and you set yourself a goal that I'm not going to be having screen time post, let's say 2 a.m. or 1:30 a.m., you still end up losing control of the amount that you are using your phone. That means that you want to sleep by 2, but then you end up sleeping by 4 or 5 or 6. So this is basically a lack of control. That means you're not able to control, you're not able to set limits for yourself as to what is considered to be, yes, this is good for me and this is something I can do, over this is something that I have to do because I'm not able to stop myself. Then is the withdrawal state. Now people usually associate withdrawal with physical symptoms, but current day and age it is not so simple that you'll end up having physical symptoms if you're withdrawing from an addiction. It could also be psychological symptoms, it could be emotional symptoms, it could be behavioral symptoms, like for example irritability, which is the most common withdrawal symptom that a lot of people face with a lot of behaviors. So that means that you get irritated, you get angry, you feel restless, your thoughts are always going on and on and on and on the minute you are taken away from that object where you are fixated to. So this is a state that does happen, though it doesn't cause any physical symptoms of withdrawal. So a lot of people think that doesn't happen in behavioral addictions, but it very much does happen. Next is tolerance. That means before I used to feel happy. So tolerance is basically associated with the level of happiness that you feel. So before I used to feel happy, let's say using screen time for 4 hours a day, and I used to be like, okay, today was a good day, I had fun, I did things and I was constructive. But then slowly over a period of time you get so used to spending this much of time that you feel like, why not 1 hour more, why not 2 hours more? Okay, I've already watched one movie, what's the big deal if I make it 2? What else do I have to do? I have all day with me. So slowly your tolerance for getting pleasure starts increasing. So one thing is not enough anymore, you need 2-3 things to do. Then is salience. Like I said, everything takes second priority. You just want to do that, you just want to do that. So let's take PUBG for example. People spoil relationships over it, people spoil their careers over it, etc. So these are basically things where you go on doing, though you feel, though there are other things that are significant in your life that should be given a priority, you're not able to because you're hooked on to something. And last is harmful use. So you know that there are bad consequences to you doing these things, but still you have to do it because your mind, your body says कि ये मुझे चाहिए ही चाहिए. So you know कि कल मुझे homework submit करना है. You know कि मेरे external वाले जो marks है इस marks के ऊपर dependent है, मुझे exam के लिए पढ़ना है. But you still end up spending your whole time with your phone or with your laptop or whatever because you're not able to take a call that this career decision of mine is far more important than, let's say, these 3 lives that I have left. So that is basically what qualifies as addiction. So if any of these things are there, even in behavioral patterns, basically we qualify it as an addiction. So like I said, people usually associate these things with substances, but as times are changing, technology is changing, the things that we get hooked on to are also changing, which basically means that it includes things like I said, shopping, it includes things like porn, it includes things like gambling, it includes things like kleptomania also, and this addiction, the gadget addiction. So now, what exactly does this do? One second. Okay, so why is this so important for us? That fine, there is nothing else to do, COVID is happening, you anyways have to isolate yourself, you anyways have कि किसी को मिलने नहीं जा सकते हैं, डिनर के लिए सेफली नहीं जा सकते हैं, प्लेग्राउंड में बच्चों को भेजने के लिए डर है, स्कूल भेजने के लिए आधे पेरेंट्स ने मना कर दिया है कि डर है कि क्या हो जाएगा. सो व्हाट अदर थिंग्स आर इवन देयर टू डू. सो अ लॉट ऑफ पेरेंट्स आर लेटिंग गो ऑफ दीज पैथोलॉजिकल बिहेवियर्स विद दैट बिलीफ कि ठीक है अभी और कुछ करने के लिए तो है भी नहीं, तो फिर करने दो. दिक्कत क्या है, जब स्कूल स्टार्ट हो जाएगी तो फिर ठीक हो जाएगा ये सब. बट इट्स रियली नॉट एज सिंपल एज दैट, बिकॉज दिस इज बेसिकली फॉर्मिंग set of behaviors that is giving them so much of pleasure that once these are taken away from them, it will be difficult for them to readjust to the monotony of daily life. Now, what are the consequences of doing this? First thing, this I'm pretty sure a lot of parents are facing. Social skills of children have drastically reduced. That means basically your ability to make friends, form relationships, share things, have empathy, play with people, all of these kind of things have drastically reduced, because now mostly the interactions that we have are virtual interactions, like this for example. So it kind of removes that human factor from the equation, which affects their social skills in the long run, especially the younger children who have relatively lesser experience dealing with real life situations pre-COVID. Now, linguistic skills, because you're constantly on a gadget, your ability to interact, like I said, your social skills itself are affected, so your ability to interact with people also reduce, because there is a limited need for it. You're either playing a game or you're watching a movie or something like that. So your ability to use language, your ability to communicate also reduces drastically. And I think going forward, when they are professionals, career oriented, that becomes a very difficult thing to deal with, because communication skills are very important. Second is critical and analytical thinking. Things have become very easy for our generation. Any question we have, any problem that we have the internet on our hands. So we just have one doubt and we also have the answer to that within the next second with just like one search. So your ability to come to solutions and your ability to think of ways to deal with problems reduces drastically, because there's basically something else which is not probably going through the same situation as you. It doesn't come from the same background as you. It doesn't share anything in common with you but the question that you have asked. That gives you a solution to a problem that might not necessarily fit your problem. So your ability to come up with solutions reduces a lot. That again has long-term consequences, because that means you end up becoming more impulsive, you end up becoming very dependent on other people to provide you solutions, because you're not able to do it by yourself. So these are basically the intellectual consequences of gadget addictions basically. But then more immediate problems would be the physical ones. So we have children who come to us with their thumb muscles completely affected, because they're not able to stop themselves from using their phones, not able to stop themselves from typing, come with severe pain, and they still are not able to stop because they're scared ki, okay, what is going to happen if I go offline for like even 10 minutes. So these are all physical consequences of these illnesses. You end up with body pains, you end up with obesity problems, you end up with visual problems. So many issues end up coming up. Your sleep-wake cycle get disturbed. So many people barely know the difference between day and night anymore, क्योंकि पूरा time तो online ही जाता है. So all of these are more physical level disturbances that could be more immediate and more concerning. Next, coming to the emotional level. So like I said, online, too much of screen time, too much of online time, lack of human interaction also affects you at an emotional level. That means at a very humane level also you get affected, because you don't feel the same connect to another person when you only know them virtually. So that basically makes you less empathetic also. That means your feeling of affection, feeling of love, feeling of care, feeling of concern, all of these things also will reduce over time. So this is like a moral thing. It also makes them more impulsive and more violent, because the whole basis of any addiction is basically what we call the reward pathway. Alright. Now that basically means that your brain is constantly looking for pleasure, which is a completely normal, justifiable and good thing. But then everything has to be set in limits. So now we are a generation, pretty much anybody below 35-40 years of age for now, but we are a generation of instant gratification. That basically means that when we were kids, and let's say we wanted a Mars bar or an M&M or some Toblerone chocolates or something like that, we had to wait like 1 year, 1.5, 2 years for like our cousins and aunts and all to come from abroad and get it for you. And then that intense feeling of pleasure ki, oh my god, mujhe 1.5 saal se chahiye tha and I finally get it. So now we've become a generation where everything is instant. That means everything is a click away. So you can order for anything across the globe and then it reaches you in a span of 1 or 2 days. So that level of patience and that level of satisfaction that your brain gets when their desires are sated has slowly become, your brain has become more tolerant to these things. So that means that before the level of pleasure I used to get ki, oh my god, finally mujhe ye cheez mili hai, that has become far easier now. So your brain basically starts craving for things more and more because getting pleasure has become so easy. It is not something that you have to work for anymore. So why not give it pleasure all the time? So these behaviors basically work on that. So there are a couple of pathways in your brain, serotonin, dopamine, all of these pathways. So these basically work on your level of inhibitions also and your level of pleasures also and all of these things. So now what happens is that when you're using gaming and porn and things like that, your brain basically feels levels of intense pleasure. And because these things are so accessible and so easy to get, your brain decides, why not more? Why not more? Why not more? And the more and more you keep giving it, the more its tolerance for that pleasure builds. So what made you okay before, what kept you happy before, might not necessarily keep you happy, let's say 6 months down the line, and you will need something more than that to keep you happy. So this is basically how it works. So now, because of this, kids especially, I'm going to say, kids have started becoming more impulsive. They want everything right now. They want solutions right now. They want answer right now. They want gaming right now. They want everything right now because the world has become such that it is possible for them to have everything right now. So now that basically leads to a lot of other illnesses going down the line, because this is only like a adolescent problem. So this is very possible that if taken the right measures, it can get corrected with not too much of an effort. But then if these behaviors progress, they move into late teens, early adulthood, late adulthood, then these form a lot more severe illnesses that have far worse consequences than the ones that I have stated over here. So now, what is it that you can do? I'm pretty sure everybody who is listening knows somebody or the other who fits into some criteria that I have mentioned till now and not. But then this is the problem. But then what are the things that can be done to reduce the problem? First thing, it's going to require a lot of effort on the family's part, because right now we're talking mostly about youngsters having these addictions. So a major role falls on the family. So the family will need to make a lot of changes so that they are able to resist, they are able to stand up to what they feel is the right kind of behaviors. So now that cannot be done so easily. You know, one day you wake up and then you're like, no, this is not something that should be done and let's change it. So it requires a lot of behavioral modifications, mostly from the kids' part, but also from the family's part, because everybody has to make adjustments to make this situation okay. Along with behavioral modification, a lot of regular counseling also, because most of the people, it has been proved that most of the people who have a tendency to form addictions also probably have a lot of subclinical illnesses. It could be personality disorders, it could be self-esteem problems, it could be their inability to socialize with other people, it could be family issues going on, it could be a lot of other things. So there are a lot of underlying problems also that are associated with any kind of addictions going ahead. So counseling is very important so that we know why the child even has gotten into behaviors like that, because not everybody who uses the phone or the internet ends up with an addiction problem. A lot of them are able to resist themselves. A lot of them are able to limit themselves, but some children are not able to do it. So it has to be further analyzed as to what it is about that child or situation or background that is leading to this child having an addiction behavior. So it involves a lot of therapy, it involves a lot of effort, it involves a lot of modifications from the part of the house. Then there's also an option of trying to shift them onto more complicated technology. That basically means, so let's say usually these addictions are on the phone because they are more accessible, they are more portable, so you can take it to the dining table, you can take it to your bed, you can take it to your school, you can take it anywhere. So phones are usually what create more of an addictive behavior because they are flexible to use. You can pretty much put them everywhere and continue it anywhere. So one thing that could be considered is to shift them onto something more complicated. So you only allow them to do it on the television, so that there's limited use, because there are probably 5-6 other people in the house also who have their own set of serials and things like that to watch. So automatically limit time. You can try shifting them onto laptops because it has limited charge, it is not so portable, and it takes effort to on karo, things like that. So it takes more effort. So trying to shift them onto other things which also cater to the same game or internet or whatever could reduce their behaviors up to a certain extent. Last option, which is not really preferred, is when nothing else works, then we can basically try properly detoxing them. That basically means forcibly cutting them off the object of their fixation and using anti-craving agents, which is basically something that we use in substance use disorders. So that the pathway that I was describing, that gives you the pleasure, that makes you want more and things like that. So these medications basically cut off that level of pleasure or that feeling of craving more, etc. So this is the last option, but this is something that can be considered if we feel that the behaviors are getting too pathological. So this is mostly about gadget addictions in youngsters. Now, this is something that should be paid a lot of attention to, especially in the last 1.5 years and probably the coming 1 year also. And that's it. Anybody has any questions? Yeah. Okay, 1 second. How to identify that our kids are getting addicted to, as most school is going online. Okay, so first thing, like I said, unfortunate times because of COVID, using virtual mediums has become an almost compulsion, but it is not the use that is a problem. Okay, so let's draw a very clear distinction here. The internet and gadgets and all add a lot of convenience to your life, and they make a lot of things easier also. It is the line between convenience and misuse that basically decides whether this is pathological behavior or not. So now what I was asked is basically, with online schooling, how is it possible to identify whether your kids are addicted or they aren't? So now, first thing, I think pretty much all the schools also mention this, that adult supervision during their classes is an absolute requirement. So it is very inconvenient, especially for working parents, but this is something that, at least for the safety of your child, is very important. Not just because of addiction issues, which is a very major concern, but also in these days, internet, online cyber crimes, etc. have also increased a lot. That basically means that they are vulnerable to a lot of other things than just addictions also. So for all you know, it could be phishing, it could be money transfers, it could be somebody misleading them in the wrong way, it could be a lot of things. So supervision is an absolute requirement, and if you're able to supervise your child using the internet or using the gadget, then usually all of these things, whether you understand whether it's an addiction or it is only their work related, etc., should clarify by itself. Then how can we bring our children back from digital addictions? So like I said, primarily the answer to that, what can we do from our ends, is therapy. Mostly because, like I said, usually there are underlying reasons as to why the kid has been more vulnerable to falling into an addiction pattern than other children. So therapy, counseling is going to be the primary mode of treatment, because once we figure out why it is happening, finding solutions for it also will be easier. And like I said, detoxing the child from the gadget, etc., would be a little more drastic options, but also something that work. Then seen behavioral like irritation gone high due to trivial reasons, how to handle, please guide. So like I said, these are mostly what we call withdrawal symptoms, and also like I said, children these days are used to instant gratification. So usually children who throw tantrums, temper tantrums when their phones are taken away and things like that, are also probably children. So I'm generalizing here, it might not necessarily be apt for the child that you are asking about, but it is very possible that even prior to this gadget addiction thing, they probably threw temper tantrums etc. for a lot of other things also, कि मुझे ये खिलौना चाहिए तो मुझे ये ही चाहिए, नहीं मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता है कि आप अफोर्ड कर सकते हो नहीं कर सकते हो, अभी टाइम है लेके जाने के लिए नहीं है. So these are things that probably have not crossed their mind. So these are children who are already a little कि चाहिए तो चाहिए, right? So that is also one of the kind of children who end up with these kind of problems slightly more. So घूम फिर के answer is therapy, because most of the addictive problems, temper tantrum throwing, all of these behaviors have to be treated with the root cause being eliminated only. Naltrexone, but it's too much costly. Any substitute for it? Alcohol patient. ये आंसर करना है क्या alcohol वाला? Okay, ठीक है. So okay, so if we are talking about anti-craving agents for substance use, especially alcohol here, somebody has asked me about naltrexone. It is slightly cheaper than some of the other alternatives that are in the market for alcohol use, but then this effective and cheaper than this is very rare to find. There are other medicines also that are cheaper substitutes, but that is all they are, substitutes. They work on a completely different pathway, so they reduce craving. So that is a completely different thing. Naltrexone, on the other hand, works on a different pathway where it reduces your pleasure. So they are two different things. So naltrexone is a really good medication, and expense wise, I don't think there is a substitute for that is cheaper. You could try something completely different, not on that pathway, but yeah. While these days children are having to take online classes, even earlier in most private schools are expected to be able to type, to research, make presentations, basically use their computers for major school activities. Primaries in this setting. Okay, so it's actually systemic. Okay, so somebody is basically mentioned how a lot of private schools are insisting on digitalization, so that even their presentations and their typing skills and use of major computers, etc., 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 are being integrated into the system of teaching. So isn't that a problem going long term? So the only answer that I can give you about this is, like I said, it's not the object that is problematic, it is the use of the object that is problematic. So digitalization of education has been there for a very, very long time. It's been there for decades in countries abroad. So it's not necessarily the fact that there are online classes or there are presentations being made, or there are you have to make what all have they said, using their computers, etc. It is not necessarily the use of these things that lead to a path for dependence. So most schools, colleges, etc., that target a global picture, so you know that the kids from that school are going to go abroad and things like that, they usually prefer if their children learn all of these things, because usually going abroad, these are the primary modes of communication. So it is not the use that is problematic. For example, right now we are communicating virtually, right? It's not that we are face to face, we are sitting here, but there is a limitation to every use. So when you start using it excessively, when it starts taking priority over everything else, this is something that I cannot live without. Oh my God, how can I be happy without this? If it is in that context, then it is problematic behavior. But teaching online or online schooling is a very age-old concept that has been there for a very, very long time in a lot of countries, and they have managed to deal with it pretty well without a lot of the kids going into gadget addictions, because there is basically a sense of responsibility before introducing these things to the children also. So now, unfortunately, in India, what has happened is that it has been pushed on to us very suddenly because of the situation, right? India probably was not mentally prepared for suddenly having an exposure of this flood of digitalization that had to happen because of COVID. So now the access is unlimited, but the awareness is limited. So your opportunity for misuse also is more, because you don't know what else to do with it. You don't know what the safe practices for using internet are. You don't know a lot of things, but you have it all in your hand. So that is the answer to that. So I don't think it's a long-term issue as long as people realize how to use it well. The diet to plan for kid who create what? नहीं, मैं समझी नहीं ये question. The diet to plan for kid who create tantrum in public? Okay, I'm so sorry, I don't understand what this question is, so I will not be able to answer it. I don't know what this means. Okay, as parents, how to protect daughter from cyberbullying? Okay, so this is an important question because in general, safety of women these days is a very questionable thing. That is even in person. So online, it already makes you more vulnerable. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that a lot of us are very hesitant to talk about a lot of topics. So I think that if you're more upfront and you are more direct with your family, usually all of these kind of problems are avoided right from the beginning, because if they feel confident enough that they can confide in you, then the chances of them having cyberbullying or getting क्या बोलते हैं, phishing, getting all of these kind of requests, going into bad relationships, all of these things can be avoided if you establish a good relationship with your kids. Not just daughters, there are a lot of sons also who face similar issues. So establishing a good relationship with your family members and being open to listening to whatever they have to say. So a lot of our mindset also has to change, because we are very hesitant about talking about things that are important to this generation. So exercise you suggest to manage kids with addiction. The first exercise that I would suggest is try seeing how long they can stay away from their addiction. That is going to be quite a physical activity for them by itself. My close relative is in the situation as you described. At any point when they are relaxing, they are using the computer and simultaneously they are not ignoring their duties, but they are just prompt to two screens, okay, at a time for hours and hours. It feels not okay, but is it dangerous for them? Okay. So somebody is asking about their relative who has something similar, in the sense that they are not able to stay away from it, but they are still able to manage all of their duties and responsibilities. So like I said, it depends on the consequences also. So if you know that you're going to have a lot of eye strain, you know that other people are concerned and bothered about it, and it's probably causing arguments at home and things like that, then it is definitely problematic behavior. If they are able to do their work, they are able to do everything, they're basically professionally also, if they're not impaired, at a health level and at a emotional level, if you feel that they have been distressed or they're doing something that is not considered to be normal, then yes, I would suggest at least tell them to consult somebody, if not anything else, if these behaviors can be changed or not.
Right, so there is one more question. They are asking when kids start throwing temper tantrums in public spaces, in malls or restaurants, and try try starting asking for things, demanding things. So what can they do?
Okay, so that is the question basically. Okay, so I'll just repeat what was asked. Basically, if children throw tantrums in public places, what is the solution at that point of time? So like I said, most of these are not so simple and easy solutions that you can do on the spot, other than get them away from that situation. But this is a behavioral problem. That means that this child basically has impulsivity problems. Ki, I want this, I want to do this, I don't care what you guys think, and this is something that I feel is right and therefore is right. So this is basically a slightly deep-rooted issue that requires you to change the child's behavior pattern. That means that it's not just कि public में temper tantrum throw किया है तो public में problem है. It is a thought process behind what leads to that child to believe कि ये करना ठीक है. So that is the problem. The child throwing a tantrum in public is not a problem. A lot of younger children do have a tendency to react badly. But younger children also don't have the intellectual capacity to assess situations. That means कि कहाँ पे क्या करना सही है और क्या गलत है. If we are talking about slightly older age group of children, जहाँ पे social limitations क्या है, किसके साथ मुझे कैसे बात करना है, कहाँ पे क्या बात करना है, things like that. If it is a child in that age limit who understands these things and yet they are throwing a tantrum, what has to be assessed is that what makes that child believe that it's okay to do it, because usually they do it only when they believe it's okay. So that is a far more deep-rooted problem that is going to go into a lot of family dynamics also. So all the questions over here are ending. So anything else you can always drop in a text over here later on, and then whenever we get time we will reply. So thank you so much for attending and listening. And just a reminder, I'm Dr. Jyotsna from New Delhi, Pune Santulan, and we have our own OPD which is under the name of Pune Santulan, and we also have an admission unit also, mental health establishment called Arunya. So in very severe cases of addictions or other psychiatric illnesses, we have space to admit, and you're more than welcome. Even if you want to come for counseling sessions also, we have qualified clinical psychologists with us. So if you are facing any difficulties, if you have any queries also, you're more than welcome to ask us.